The moment of truth has finally arrived. Super Clash 1 is upon us, and yours truly, the venerable old champ Vern, is pulling out all the stops to take down that upstart Yankee from New York. I've enlisted the help of the stylin', profilin' Ric Flair and the dynamic Magnum TA to present United Front against our opponent. The show kicks off with Larry Nelson proclaiming this event to be the most epic in professional wrestling history. A declaration he repeats with such frequency, it's as if he's been coached to drill it into our minds. Meanwhile, I'm bringing my A game on the mic, delivering a verbal smackdown that leaves the competition in the dust. But let's be real, Nelson's got some serious skills of his own. The camera cuts quickly between the raucous crowd, Nelson's enthusiastic commentary, and Brad Rheingans' analysis, showcasing a frenetic energy that's hard to ignore. If there's one criticism to be made, it's that the editing could use some refinement. But hey, that's all part of the charm of this rough around the edges production. What a dream team. Brad Rheingans and Larry Nelson joining forces. Rheingans is on a mission, having put in 2 months of intense training akin to an Olympic athlete gunning for gold. He makes his way to the ring, traversing the vast expanse of Comiskey Park's baseball field. Meanwhile, Lawrence Full Nelson sits down with Steve Regal, still in the process of evolving into his future persona, Darren Matthews. Regal's time in the spotlight is fleeting, and after this AWA stint, he largely fades into obscurity. Introduced as a skilled amateur wrestler and light heavyweight champion of the world, Regal boasts of being the #1 amateur and top light heavyweight under 220 pounds. Dubbed Mr. Electricity, his credentials are impressive, but one can't help but wonder if his electrical contractor license is up to date. It's almost as if he's trying to drum up business for his side hustle, especially when Vern attempts to replay the Road Warriors match and could use a spark of electricity. One has to wonder, did Regal's contract include a clause allowing him to promote his electrical company? The camera pans to a desolate upper deck at Comiskey Park, a stark contrast to the impressive attendance numbers. It's a clever trick of the trade. When filming for TV, you learn to work around the empty seats. But in this case, the producers didn't quite succeed in hiding the vast expanse of vacant chairs. They tried to pack the fans into a tight shot, but forgot to account for the camera angle that reveals the outfield's eerie emptiness. It's a mistake they've made one too many times. The first match of the evening kicks off with Steve Regal, the American Wrestling Association light heavyweight champion, putting his title on the line against Brad Rheingans. As the bell rings, a lone fan's voice pierces the air, shouting, "How bad do you want the title rankings?" The answer, it seems, is not bad enough. Regal's opponent looks like he'd rather be anywhere else, stuck in the opener for the rest of his career. Meanwhile, Larry Nelson has taken his place at the announcer's table, bounding into position with the frenetic energy of a man mainlining espresso. He informs us that Regal has held the light heavyweight title for a couple of months now, having won it from the hapless Buck Zumhofe. One can only imagine Buck's devastation, though apparently not devastated enough to make a lasting impression. As the scene unfolds, a title crawl flashes on screen, announcing that the coveted midget championship is up for grabs later in the show. I must admit, I appreciate the unapologetic candor of 80s wrestling. No tiptoeing around sensitive language here. The promoter likely doesn't lose sleep over potentially shortchanging these athletes on their paydays. After all, from my perspective, their compact stature might justify shall we say, diminutive compensation package, a fraction of the full picnic spread. If you will, the bell rings and Brad Rheingans and Steve Regal engage in a respectful lockup, each seeking to assert their dominance. The crowd is on the edge of their seats as the two wrestlers exchange holds, with Regal narrowly missing a swift swing. Rheingans showcases his agility, slipping out of Regal's grasp and transitioning into a standing switch. Meanwhile, Nelson's commentary provides a peculiar aside noting Regal's recent beard, shaving escapade. One can't help but wonder if this tidbit is a desperate attempt to fill airtime or a genuine insight into the wrestler's psyche. As the match unfolds, Regal demonstrates his technical prowess, leaving Nelson to stumble over his words in an effort to keep pace. It's almost as if Nelson is trying to outdo himself in a game of verbal gymnastics, fabricating facts and figures on the fly. His admission of being perpetually hungover in his autobiography raises questions about his credibility as a commentator. Is he genuinely attempting to provide play-by-play analysis, or is he simply trying to distract from his own inebriated state? Back in the ring, Rheingans executes a series of impressive moves, including a headlock takeover, shoulder block, and monkey flip. Nelson's commentary struggles to keep up, devolving into a jumbled mess of physiology 101 and armchair psychology. One can't help but suspect that his true pain stems not from the wrestler's moves, but from his own desperation to stay coherent. As the match reaches its climax, Nelson's winded commentary becomes a sideshow, with his labored breathing and stammering words painting a vivid picture of a man struggling to keep his demons at bay. It's almost as if he's calling the match while simultaneously juggling his own personal demons, desperate to make it through the broadcast without succumbing to his vices. The real question on everyone's mind: will Nelson make it through the match without needing a timeout to replenish himself? Regal asserts his dominance, driving Rheingans into the corner and unleashing a flurry of strikes. He attempts to follow up with a high-impact Irish whip, but Rheingans dodges at the last second, sending Regal crashing into the turnbuckle. Undeterred, Regal refocuses on his target, zeroing in on Rheingans' vulnerable arm. As Rheingans tries to create distance with a cartwheel, Regal seizes the opportunity to strike, but his monkey flip attempt is thwarted when Rheingans slips out of the way. Momentum sends him tumbling to the mat, where he's quickly caught in a precarious position. Rheingans senses an opening and attempts to counter with a top wrist lock, but Regal cunningly uses his opponent's hair to pull him back down. With a sly grin, Regal feigns innocence, playing the role of the oblivious heel to perfection as he tries to deceive the referee. I drill into my wrestlers the importance of a no-nonsense kick-punch approach. None of that flashy attention-seeking nonsense you'd find on MTV. Minnesotans crave authentic competition, and if they want a spectacle, they'll head to the big top. New York, on the other hand, is a never-ending circus, all smoke and mirrors, lacking the heart of real wrestling. In my book, the professional style is an evolution of the amateur game, amplified to thrill both the competitor and the crowd. As I glance around, I catch Regal's eye, and he gives me a subtle nod. He's got this. Next thing you know, he's got Brad Rheingans locked in a headlock that looks more like a sloppy hug. But Brad's selling it like his life depends on it, straining to break free in a display of Herculean effort. Regal almost loses his grip, but recovers just in time. The sequence continues with Regal slamming Brad to the mat, dropping an elbow, and setting up for another slam. This time, though, he misses the elbow, leaving the crowd on the edge of their seats. Brad Rheingans suddenly finds his second wind, busting out a bizarre polka-inspired dance move that leaves the crowd bewildered. He seizes the moment, unleashing a flurry of punches, including a right hook and a corner backdrop that sends his opponent crashing into the turnbuckles. It's a signature Rheingans move. Whenever someone takes a tumble into the lights, Brad's on the comeback trail. He follows up with a pin attempt, but the referee only counts to 2. Undeterred, Rheingans lands an atomic drop and goes for another cover, but Jin Garvin appears out of nowhere, sauntering onto the ring apron to cause a ruckus. It's a curious move, considering Garvin has a high-stakes match against the Road Warriors later tonight, with the AWA tag team titles on the line. Perhaps he's just trying to pad his paycheck with a little extra overtime. Whatever the reason, Brad Rheingans isn't having it, and he quickly takes down Garvin. But before he can capitalize, Steve Regal sneaks in with a schoolboy pin, snatching victory from the jaws of defeat. In a finish that would make Monday night Raw proud, Regal retains the light heavyweight title in a thrilling 8 minutes and 15 seconds, sending the crowd into a frenzy at Super Clash 1. Let's shake things up. This isn't the WWA's William Regal, but rather Mr. Electricity, Steve Regal. Regal's subsequent WWF stint was short-lived, relegated to primetime wrestling, where he'd struggle to put away jobbers like Iron Mike Sharpey, taking an eternity to secure a win. Rheingans, an amateur wrestler turned pro, was essentially Bobby Heenan's protege, much like Test and Mark Merrow were to Mick Foley. Unfortunately, Rheingans suffered the same WF fate, although I do recall him helping Kurt Hennig during his rehab. It's worth noting that this match is for the light heavyweight title currently held by Regal. In a surprising display of sportsmanship, both men exchange a handshake before the bell, a rare gesture from the heelish Regal. Rheingans is billed as a no-nonsense wrestler, which in 80s parlance translates to yawn-inducing. The match begins with some mat-based grappling, but the crowd seems less than enthralled, setting the tone for a potentially underwhelming contest. I was caught off guard by the existence of a light heavyweight championship belt. It's not exactly a marquee title. Apparently, Rheingans was struggling to hit the 220-pound mark, which begs the question, would that have made a difference? It's jarring to see a powerhouse like Rheingans slumming it in a lower weight class. As for the match itself, it was a forgettable affair that failed to leave a lasting impression. The problem lies in the fact that these light heavyweight bouts often devolve into a contest between wrestlers who just happen to weigh under a certain threshold rather than showcasing a distinct style or approach. The result is a snooze, fest that fails to ignite any real excitement.